My father was Callis K. Allen. He went by K. Allen, and my mother was Doris Brady Allen. And my father was born and raised in Heber, Utah, my mother in South Jordan. My mother had more than 100, well over 100 first cousins that lived very close to her, so big family, close family. I learned a lot from my parents. Both of them were very friendly people. I learned a lot about the value of friendship. They had their own friends, but they also had couples that they did things in common. They would go on trips a couple of times a year, and then anytime we vacationed as a family, we would go with other people. We usually didn't go on our own. I would say from my parents, both of them, I learned about being reliable, being dependable. You do what you say you'll do. People can count on you. I would say I learned from both of them a good work ethic. Even though they were both very good people and very loving people and nurturing of us children, there was some tension in their relationship. I picked up on it and was attuned to it and became aware of feelings and sensitive to feelings and sensitive to dynamics that were going on between people, which is eventually, I think, one of the reasons that I got into the field of psychology. I felt so free when I got away from home. That, my first couple of years I was at the College of Eastern Utah in Price, not a big school, but it was a relief. My father was kind of an entrepreneurial, a Renaissance man. He did a lot. He got a master's in psychology, but it worked for the UEA, but then that became an avocation, and he was a businessman. And land development and banking, started a number of banks, developed some big pieces of property in both Utah and Denver. He was in politics. He was Speaker of the House in the state of Utah. My siblings and I are very close, 4 of us, a brother and 2 sisters, and to this day we're very close. But, Mother was always there for us. She was available when we came home and, provided well for our needs, was a real nurturer of us. Oh, I would say being a father has just changed me profoundly to the depths of my soul. For me, life is about, and the gospel is about relationships. And I think there are no more important relationships than our family relationships. There's nothing as joyful as holding a little baby in your arms, and nothing as joyful as a little child sitting at your side or sitting on your lap and reading them a story, and then watching them as they grow up and as they grow older. Those are very, very tender moments. But I will also say that there's a lot of hardship that comes in those intimate relationships that we don't know about, again, when we're young, that we don't necessarily count on. But family life is not easy. When we started having children, I was still pretty young and maybe in many ways immature, and it was at a hard time in my life. I was a doctoral student at the University of Minnesota and going through hard times, working half-time to support the family, and a lot of pressures from going to school full-time and a lot on my plate. And those kids were so young at the time, and I don't know that I always gave them my best. It's how we learn to live the gospel of Jesus Christ in that marital relationship and in our family relationships. It's how we learn about love and about non-judgment and about forgiveness and about being vulnerable and soft-hearted and about honesty. I went to the College of Eastern Utah, which was a great decision for me. I loved it. Then I went on a mission to Bolivia, came home, went to BYU, graduated, entered the master's program in organizational behavior at BYU. And just partway through that program, took an internship, which was a wonderful opportunity with Procter & Gamble down in Albany, Georgia. But during that time had been accepted into a program at the University of Minnesota, a doctoral program. And so we moved, Judy and I got my doctorate in psychology. I chose the clinical route, and we moved to Colorado, and where my parents had moved, and eventually all of my siblings settled. And we started an institute called the Human Values Institute. And my father and I started a program called Making Things Happen, which was an intensive, transformative type course in personal awareness, in self-development. It was very gratifying work. In that work, I would say I really learned to love people and learned to believe in the goodness of people. You know, in that course, people opened up their hearts to each other, and it was hard to not care about them. And I also felt God's love very much during that time. I felt so much His presence in that work, even though it wasn't spiritual. It was spiritual work, even though it wasn't church work, I guess I would say. But I felt His love for me, and I know that love sustained me because of the difficulty of much of that work. But I think after a time, I also grew weary. It was very hard emotionally for me, but I decided to make a transition into consulting because I had the background in consulting. And in fact, the very week I made that decision, I got a call from a company in Spokane, Washington. The president of the company offered me a job, and at first I didn't know. He said, "Hey, I'm looking for somebody in HR." I racked my brain, and finally I said, "Well, you know, Fred, I've been wanting to make a transition." And he said, "Well, I was hoping." And it was such a good experience. It was a perfect transition into organization development consulting, because I realized I don't have to be an expert in HR. I have a team of people that are experts. All I have to do is manage this team. As we transitioned back to Colorado, I met a man by the name of Preston Pond. The two of us came together and we formed a company called the Center for Organizational Design. And our vision was to create collaborative organizations, to change the culture of organizations from top-down, command and control, to more collaborative. And I wrote a book called The Hero's Choice, Leading from the Inside Out. And then in 2015, Judy and I decided to go on a mission. And we sold our house, and we sold our cars, and we gave most everything else away, all of our furniture and so many of our personal belongings, and we were on our way to New Delhi, India. Since Mission have been creating online programs in personal development. I have a program on parenting, a program on marriage, a program on happiness, conflict, deep listening, employee engagement and leadership, and so both business topics as well as personal growth topics, and I see that as my future until I die. They will have to carry me out with my boots still on. I have a pretty good audience. I have like 60,000 students online right now. Oh, my faith journey has not been a traditional, conventional journey. I remember even back in high school, I had questions, and I had seminary teachers that would call my parents and say, "You know, your son is going to go off on the deep end, and he's asking these questions, and he's just this rabble-rouser." And the truth is, I was not intending to be a rabble-rouser or a doubter or a questioner, but that's just my brain. And I know to some extent what it's like to not feel like you belong. Because there have been times when I have felt like neither fish nor fowl. Like I've wondered, what is my place? I really want to belong here. But what is my place? Because I see things in some ways differently than other people. And so it's not been an easy journey. I give thanks to Judy for not guilting me, but for her support. And there was an 8-year period of time when I was inactive in the church, and she took our kids to church every Sunday and was faithful. And again, did not make me feel bad about myself. But I came back, and I came back because I feel the Spirit. And because I felt God's love. And because I knew that this is where I needed to be in the basic doctrines, and I believe, I have faith But there have been things for me that have been difficult that I haven't been able to share or talk about with most people, because I think most people really wouldn't understand. I've always, or not always, oftentimes had some dialogue going on with people from CES, you know, that bishops would send to me, or I would. And my faith is based upon the Savior. My yoke is easy, my burden is light. I think Jesus is saying, you know, there are all of these things that can feel heavy laden, but come to me, look at me, see me. I've had to wrestle some big issues to the ground, but I think I've wrestled those issues to the ground, and there's not a lot that could happen that would shake my faith. And I think in this faith journey, more important than anything else to me, I'm one who believes in ministering. I believed in the home teaching program. I believe in the ministering program because, again, I think that's the gospel. I think the gospel has to do with how we show up for other people. I guess I look back on my career and I wish I had been more open to mentoring. I wish I had let people mentor me. For some reason, I thought I had to do it on my own. I guess I want to be remembered as somebody who had a loving heart and who cared about people. And I hope that my kids and my grandkids feel that way about me one day. That, you know, that they can think back on their grandpa. With fondness and know that he loved them, that I loved them. A hobby is to get out with Judy and to be in nature. I love to be in nature and to hike. And a hobby is to run. I love to run. I like skiing. Okay, what are your parents' hobby? My kids said, my father's hobby is cleaning the garage and napping. And I hope I'm remembered for more than that. I love a garden salad. I eat a big salad, a big bowl of salad every day. And I have always enjoyed fresh fruits and vegetables. Being home, but we have a house in the mountains of Colorado. And that's maybe the hardest thing, one of the hardest things about leaving Colorado. One of my favorite authors is a man by the name of Thich Nhat Hanh. It's from him that I learned about meditation, for example. He's written a couple of books that I just read and reread. Recently, one of my favorite scriptures is, "Be still and know that I am God." Favorite hymn is "A Poor Wayfaring Man of Grief."
We were both seniors, and I was in student government, and we had a mutual friend in student government. He was looking at my schedule, and he said, "Oh, a good friend of mine is in your experimental psychology class." I said, "Who's that?" He said, "Roger Allen. He's really smart." I thought, how smart's really smart? So,
Smart enough to date you.
we started dating that last semester, and it was pretty fast. When the bishop found out we were engaged and how we'd only known each other a few months, that maybe it would be better for me to continue getting to know him. So I went to Denver with him for about a month and a half and had my own apartment and got a little job. And my parents met Roger a few days before we got married. And my dad said, "Well, you're the one that has to live with him. I'm sure if you want to live with him, I can put up with him." Roger and I have a complementary relationship. We're much better working together than either one of us separate. But in some ways, we have a lot of common interests: history, outdoors, hiking, camping, all that kind of stuff. Our values are very similar, but emotionally, we balance each other out. Roger is the greatest teacher I've had in my life. I have learned so much from him. And become a much better person in the 47 and a half years we've been married. But I think people can see his good heart. He lays his heart out there, and he truly loves people. He truly, truly loves people. He's not perfect. Okay.
About that.
That's the big secret. I've told him for years, you can be perfect as soon as you can, because then my imperfections will no longer bother you.